Aditya Patwardhan, thank you so much for being with us on ITV Gold. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you so much, Aditya. It's a pleasure coming on your channel and speaking with you again.
Of course, your new movie has been released on Amazon Prime. Congratulations. Transference is the name. It's a new psychological thriller. Big moment for you. How are you feeling about that?
It feels great. It feels great to have the movie out on that platform. And it's out of the 3 features that are coming out that I've directed, this is the first one that's completely American. So that's also another thing that I'm happy about. We were planning a theatrical release, but because of the entire COVID crisis, we thought instead of going the theater way, we should try to release it with Amazon.
Whose house is this? It's your grandparents'. My dad just died.
You sure you want to do this?
Let's get it over with.
Sadie?
There's a monster under the bed.
Told you not to wander.
Look what I found. Piper is afraid of the dark.
How did you know what her name was?
She told me.
Time for bed.
But the story's not over.
Listen to my last words, beloved, said the mother. Keep the doll with you at all times.
You're hungover? Are you sure you're in the right headspace?
I am not depressed. Feed her when she's hungry.
That is not what I'm saying. Maybe we should get you back on the meds until we find someone you can talk to.
You have to stay very quiet or he's going to find you. Let her guide you when you feel lost.
Clearly, you're not coping well. Is there anyone you can talk to?
Tell her all your secrets. She'll keep them safe.
Sadie, what did you do?
This isn't real. Piper's not real.
Imaginary friends? She's a sensitive kid. You haven't even been acting like yourself lately.
The mother's breath rushed out from between her lips.
Stay away from me! Stay away from my daughter!
And her eyes fell closed forevermore.
Do you think that's something that a lot of movies we're going to see that with, where it's going to be streaming on online platforms more because of the COVID-19 situation?
Yes, that's definitely happening with many, especially independent movies like mine, because even if the theaters open, there will be a sense of suspicion that people won't go right away.
Yeah.
So the movies that will release first would be the big movies, that come from Warner Brothers or studios like that. So especially the independent movies, they would directly go for platforms like Amazon or Netflix.
Perfect. Let's dig right into it, Aditya. I have a lot of questions about the movie. First of all, tell us about Transference. What is the story about? And I know it's female-oriented, it's female-centered, and it discusses a very, very important issue. So I would love for you to highlight what the movie is about.
So in a sense, the protagonist of the movie, and again, this is something that gets revealed at the end of the movie, so I'm trying to find the right balance of how much I should say and how much I can hold back. But in a sense, the protagonist of the movie has undergone sexual abuse in her past, in her childhood. And it's how those dark memories has affected her psyche and how they are manifesting in her current life. When she's in her late 30s, she already has a good family for herself. But those horrors of her past, they end up affecting even her present. And if she doesn't deal with them right away, there is a very good chance that it'll leak over to her children and her family, her husband. And the violence that happened with her stays on within her timeline. So the film deals with that how she, as a victim, can find a way to cope up with what she went through. Because it's a subject that largely goes unaddressed. It happens in places you wouldn't expect. It is much more often than it is told to, and there's a hush-hush mentality around this within all societies, not just it's set in America, but it's anywhere in the world. So a person who has gone through that, what are the side effects that this has, and at the end, how the victim can come out of it by confronting their own past horrors. That's what the film is about. And though it starts off as a horror psychological thriller, it finishes off on a note where it's about reconciliation with your own identity.
Aditya, in the light of the Me Too movement, especially when we're looking at sexual abuse, childhood abuse, how was the process of conceptualizing this movie and executing it? What did it require out of you as a director?
That's a good question. It took me a long time to understand the mindset of the victim, because and that doesn't mean that I didn't understand it before. Like, obviously I did empathize with everything that was going on with the Me Too movement and the stories that you hear, but that one is you hearing about it on the news, and then one is trying to delve into the mindset of the victim itself, because once I'm directing it, I need to feel exactly how the victim would feel. I need to feel what she would go through to make my film real, to make it honest for the audience. So that process took the longest time to realize how the amount of cases that happen, what is the outcome of most of those cases, what do the children who undergo such a thing in the past, how do they suffer once they are grown ups, once they're in their 30s or in their 40s, once they have families. So the hard part was doing that research and almost trying to make myself feel as if I'm in their shoes, and then thinking of directing this movie.
Wow, quite a process right there. How did you make sure that there was no victim shaming done in the movie? I'm sure that must have been a huge part of making this movie and making sure that that's not shown, if I'm getting you right.
Yes. That was it. Was in every line of the script or the finale of the movie, when when you get the conclusion, one of the biggest concerns we had was to never sound as if the victim is wrong or there's any kind of victim shaming or oh, you should have gotten out of it. There was nothing of that sort. So during the scripting, while rehearsals and while filming and even editing, we were making sure that nowhere there is a message of victim shaming, even a hint of it, because sometimes it might happen and we won't notice it, in the writings or in the editing itself. But for someone third party to be watching the movie, they would see it that way. So I had to be really careful that there's no kind of victim shaming happening, and any kind of shame that needs to be put, or any kind of blame that needs to be put, other than the perpetrator itself, is the society around these people who try to shove these incidents away or try to not speak about it, especially if they're happening, especially if such an incident happened with someone in close proximity, within friends or within family. Society tries to hush it up, like, oh, no, we don't do this. And especially in the middle class, upper middle class, you try to not reveal these dark secrets or dark things that happen. So I had to make sure that any kind of shaming or blame that was to happen, that should go towards the people around these incidents, not the victims involved.
I have to ask you, the writer of this movie, who's also the producer, what do you have to say about her work? And what was the process sort of figuring out this movie with her? Because she definitely plays a really important role in the script of the movie. Talk to us a little bit about her.
So Nicole Cannon is a very talented writer and actress. She's originally an actress. This was her first full-length feature script. So, finding the balance between me directing it and being my first film on this subject as a feature. Yeah. So that was a tricky part. But a lot of the events in the movie were inspired from real life things that happened with Nicole. Obviously not that extreme, and obviously that's a private story, so I won't go on that much. Yeah. But as a writer, she found a very beautiful balance between what she knew happened with her and then how to mix it with fiction, so that it can create a very good narrative, where she doesn't come off looking as a victim while writing it, but at the same time she gives a message that's not victimizing but rather empowering for everybody else. So that was one of the most beautiful things Nicole did, that the movie ended on a note of being empowered and not on the note of being a victim.
She actually says Transference is the story of a woman's journey through the many stages of recovery of victimhood and into wholeness. Especially with the South Asian community that's watching it, could you explain to them what is exactly happening when you look at assault and abuse? And why is it so important that we talk about this journey out of victimhood? Because that is a real big issue portrayed by the society on these victims. Could you explain into, or perhaps educate our audience into what is exactly going on and why we have to stand up for this?
So, after any kind of such an incident, stepping out of the victim mode is not only because, because then things would become better. That's not the only issue where people should stand up because these events happen. But if the victim stays in that mindset of victim mode, there's a very big chance that the person, he or she, will end up passing that violence on. And I don't mean in the sense that, oh, violence happened to this person, they'll pass it on, by doing violence to someone else. Like that too happens, but I'm not saying that's the only case. But if the violence lives on within their mind, if they are always a victim within their mind, there's a very high chance that especially people that they raise, especially their children, they'll pass on some kind of psychological issues further on, which will never get solved. It'll become part of the family tree or part of the friend circle. So when we say that the victim has to come out of the whole, victim mindset into empowerment, or when society has to stand up to such events, it's because to stop such incidents in the first place, but it's also because so that these things don't pass on. If a violence has happened, it doesn't become a permanent thing in the in the family or in the circle.
Yeah. And I think that is so important. I again appreciate you for approaching a subject like this. I think we need more and more work and more conversations, especially in our community, on this. What do you have to say about your actress of the movie, and how does and her portrayal of this vulnerable person and her journey? What kind of required out of her to really play this role perfectly?
Lauren did one of the wonderful jobs in the movie, for sure. It was a pleasure working with her. The character of Camille, that's her name in the film. The character is interesting because she, in her present life, when we are jumping into her story, she is already a well-established psychiatrist, and she's helping other people deal with traumas that they have in their lives. So on the outside, everything looks okay. That she's a psychiatrist, so she's able to handle her own mind, of course. And then she's treating others. She has a family of 2 children and a husband. Everything is, going well. But while being this strong, woman who's in control of her life, who's independent, who's not dependent she's dependent on her husband for companionship. She's not dependent as in, financial or in any other way she has to be. But even for a woman like this, when there is something in her past that she hasn't dealt with, that that's still lingering in her mind, and she put a cover over it, she hid it away because her family asked her to, because her mom, because her relatives, they tried to put a cover on it. Oh, what, these things happen, don't speak about it. So for a person like this, in spite of being a psychiatrist, in spite of being an expert in the field, when she herself did not deal with her own past, it comes back to haunt her. So the actress Lauren had to mix these two. On one hand, she had to be this independent, strong-willed psychiatrist who solved other people's lives. But on the other hand, her childhood self was a victim of something so horrible that she was extremely vulnerable when she was not in her psychiatry office. So that was a very very difficult thing for Lauren to do, which she managed very well, to mix these two characters and then bring them to reconciliation in the end.
Wow. What a character that's been developed here, It just almost makes you wonder if she's really looking for her soul inside, if she's really looking for that voice to really help her through. What about the rest of the cast and crew? What were, your expectations with them for this movie, and do you think they met up to most of them?
Yes, they did. Like all the actors were absolutely amazing. The principal people in the movie were Lauren, who plays Camille, and there was Seth Michaels, who plays her husband, Mike. So, and they have 2 children. So principally the story revolves around these 4 people, and then you have other guys. The role of the husband was also, very crucial because, how do I put it simply? He was a manly man in the story. What I mean by manly man, he works at a he owns a construction company. He's that kind of a burly guy. Guy's guy, he'll come home, he'll have a beer kind of person, takes good care of his family. He's good in every sense. But at the same time, he's completely ignorant of what's going on with his wife. And not because he's a bad person, just because he hasn't looked that way. For him, what's the big deal? He has that kind of an attitude. So with his character, we wanted to show that how people are unconsciously contributors to making the victims feel further victimized. Not that they did something bad, not that he would never abuse someone like this, not that he would probably kill the guy if he finds out. But just by not being aware, just by being in their own world, not knowing that this happens, not having the sensitivity for the subject, is also a big contributor to the fact that victims are not able to stand up to it. Victims are not able to reveal it. So his character is important for this. And through the movie, he also learns his part of the story, that he needs to know what is going on. And he becomes a metaphor for the society at large, who are technically not at fault. They didn't do anything wrong, who are good people, but just that they're ignorant. They haven't faced up to it.
Wow. What about the kids that are being featured? That must have been quite an experience for you.
Yes. Kids were great. Great actors, and kids are kids. They tend to run around a lot on set. So, for me, I mean, I don't know how it sounds, me being a director saying this, but instead of directing them as actors, my first job had become to make sure that they sit and act. To make sure they're not tired, because it's little children. If you make them do 8 takes of one scene, by the 5th take they'll be like, I want to go and play or do something else. So managing kids that way is always fun. But both their characters were very deep for their age, because the boy who plays the older brother, called Barry, he sees what is going on with his mom. As the story goes further and further down the psychological spiral, he sees what is going on and slowly starts becoming detached with everything that's going on in the family. And he starts being engrossed in his own world. He'll be out playing. He won't care what's going on. That was an inception of how a person would grow up to not care, even if he's not a bad guy. So his character represents that. And the girl, the daughter, she has a direct impact of what's going on with the mom. So that was a metaphor for how, if the victim is not able to handle or face up to, or not help to face her own past, there's a chance that she might pass it further on without knowing. So how the daughter throughout the movie gets more and more impacted by what's going on with her mother. And everything resolves ultimately when her mother finds peace with herself, with her own past. So for the kids, it was a very tough task to do, to bring themselves to this mindset of, playing out these two roles, which were technically too deep for their age.
Yeah. And it's very hard emotions, Aditya, that we are talking about with a family that's dealing with a history of sexual childhood abuse. How did you sort of balance out in order to make sure that you were being fair to the content?
First of all, my perspective to these 4 people, the family of the 4, was, rather than them dealing with this past of sexual abuse, I looked at it like they are not dealing with this past of sexual abuse. So I tried to look at it as normally, they were, for all purposes, they were as normal as a family as anyone could be.
Right.
But there was this added history of the sexual abuse which was playing into it. So it was a normal family, disrupted at places, because this had happened with the mom 30 years back.
Wow.
So, it was tweaking it this way. I was not coming at it through that, they're facing this past, but rather they're not facing this past, because they didn't have, not the children, but because the grown-ups didn't have the courage to accept it and face it right away. Yeah. So it's leaking into their daily lives. So yeah, that's how I did it. And as far as, justice to the content, that's also for the audience to see, because I don't want to say that I did justice right away. It's for everybody to judge that, were we as a team able to?
Well, you are very humble, so I can definitely see that. Aditya, how have the critics responded to Transference, and are you happy with how the response has been so far, especially from the critics?
Yes, we've been very happy with all the feedback and response that we have received. In all the departments. Sometimes the critique is for individual. Sometimes it's for cinematography. Sometimes it's especially for acting, especially for music. Sometimes it's also for direction. So so far we have been very happy with the response we got.
What do they feel most connected with?
They felt connected with this whole idea that. While Camille was leading a normal life, and for all purposes, it was a very normal everyday life, and something that was hidden deep in her past, it slowly manifests itself. So that's something a lot of our viewers would connect with, saying that, even if we don't have an incident an incident as severe as that, But there are things from our childhood that now, after watching this, we realize yes, they do play a part into who we are right now, shaping our identity all the time. And we don't realize that it's doing that. So what they could relate to was this of what Camille goes through at the end of the movie. That if you deal with it, your true self comes out because you've dealt with it, it's gone. I mean, metaphorically speaking, if there's a shoe, if there's a, the small piece of rock, I don't know, like tiny pebble in your shoe, and then you are an athlete, your feet will continuously keep hurting and you won't be able to run. And then if you think, oh, I can't run and I need to treat myself, that's why you give yourself steroids. That's not going to help. And the treatments will go on, and that will become your new identity. But the only thing you had to do was take your shoe out, take the pebble off and wear it again, and you'll be okay. So, this metaphor went across through most of our audience, that how in events from the past, even if they're very small, can end up shaping who we are, and not in a good way, like, twisted.
That is so true. If I was to ask you about the hopes with this movie, or the kind of extent you wanted to reach, what would you say? And also, who is your target audience for a movie like Transference?
So target audience, like if I speak as a director, for me, the target audience is anyone, basically audience who are PG-13, but it goes for every section of the society. And because it speaks about these events happening everywhere. It's not limited to, southern states of upper middle class America. It's not just that. It's a story that can resonate through all sections and all societies, as long as they understand English. So for me, the audience is that. But if I speak as a producer, because it's predominantly propagated as a horror film, as a thriller film. So our primary audience becomes people who like watching these kind of films, because it's, though the principal message of the movie ends up being reconciliation, the movie starts off being a thriller. And this whole issue in the protagonist's past is projected in the film as a horror story. It's a personal horror.
For sure. What do you say to an audience or a critic that may feel uncomfortable with the subject and may choose not to watch a movie like that? What do you say to that? Are there people that taboo a subject like this?
I think that's the exact issue that the film is talking about. That hushing it away will not push it off. And any subject that has relevance is always offensive. So the answer is not saying it. There should not be any kind of censorship in these terms. That's exactly what the movie is saying, that whatever the protagonist went through, other than obviously the her facing abuse and the guy who did it, other than him, the other reasons why she went through all this was exactly this, that people didn't want to talk about it. Or there was a mentality of, let's not talk about this because it's very hush-hush. So anyone, if any critique says that, they feel offended or they don't feel good watching this, I would say that, that's the exact reason that you should watch it.
Yeah.
Right? At least as of now, nobody has said that. So, I'm glad.
For sure. I'm sure it's connecting with so many people. What would you say to our South Asian community that is watching you on why they should go ahead and watch Transference?
Well, I'm Indian, that's why. First reason, but on a light note. But second is this, because the subject is universally relevant. It's not, for example, it's not a sci-fi set in some desert, which, it's very American or Western story. It's not that. So though the characters are all American, the story is very much universal. And many people can relate to it. I hope they don't. But I'm sure many will know that there have been stories in their own lives, within their own friends or relatives or with themselves, that are similar to what we are showing in the movie. So that's why I think they should watch it. At least that's the response. Within the private screenings that we were doing for this film in India, almost all the people who watched it, they said that this feels so relevant. That even people who couldn't speak English, but they watched it with subtitles when we were doing private screenings, we all got the same response, that this is something that's relevant for us. The only difference is, if it was in India, the skin would have been brown, the language would have been Hindi or something else.
Right.
But the essence of the story is still the same.
Where else are you hoping to release the movie on? What other platforms can we look forward to?
So we are still, there are a couple of platforms who specifically deal with, psychological thrillers and horrors. We are speaking with them. We are speaking for like Netflix and Amazon in India as well. because though the niche market for the movie would be US, but because of me being Indian, there is still a chance that it might, because of my name involved, it might do something well in India as well. So we are speaking with them. So that's what is happening, and of course film festivals. So we right away went for Amazon and did not start with film festivals because a lot of these festivals got postponed because of COVID crisis.
Right.
So we thought, what, we will do festivals on the side, but let's go for a release right away.
Yes. And you love festivals. You're a big name in the festival industry as a director. So I'm hoping that this movie reaches that that space as well.
I hope so too. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Aditya, it was so amazing having you here on ITV Gold with us, discussing such an important movie. I would love for you to give one last message for our audience, but perhaps for the younger generation, I would love for you to give out a message. I think they can learn a little bit and probably take some advice from you as well.
In terms of filmmaking, you mean?
Yes.
Well, yeah, that's a tough one actually. Giving a message out is always, is always like, okay, what to say. But yeah, I mean, if someone's starting out in filmmaking, one of the things that helped me a lot was like not saying no to any project that comes to me, especially in the early days. Doing everything and everything that you can. So, but in your own field. So, for example, you want to become a director. So anything that you get a chance to direct, even if it's like a 1 minute short video or a 3 minute music video that you might feel as though it's not as expensive, it's beneath me or anything, never think in that way. Always, any project that comes your way, say yes. Because for me to land these 3 features, all the projects that I did before that have played an important part, all of them, even if it was a 1-day shoot. So that's one of the things. And never, always say yes to every project and always try out anything that feels alien. Like, if there's a project in a different language or there's a subject you haven't handled before. Like Transference was the same for me. This is not a subject I had handled before. Even in my short films, I had never addressed this and in such a way where it was so subtle and weaved in with horror, where the subject actually reveals itself at the end. So it was a long process just to get my mindset on the same page as the writers. But that challenge is always very enriching, and it'll help the movie that I'll do after. So there might be some mistakes I did in Transference which I don't know of yet, but I'm sure I won't do them again as the next movie comes. So any new filmmaker, don't say no to any subject or any film, or film or music video or anything.
I have to ask you this one last question, even though I said that was my last question. What is coming up next for you? And are we looking at more foreign language movies as well? Because, you're kind of a pioneer in that industry as well.
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of shorts and stuff before. So right now I have 2 features. So one, other than Transference, there's a movie called And the Dream That Mattered. It's a Korean language movie. So it's, I think, 20% in English, rest everything is in Korean. We film it in South Korea, and then some things were filmed in Los Angeles. So that got a private screening with Lionsgate Studios, and now we are looking for platforms. The same thing, film festivals we want to start, but because the festivals are not happening exactly the way they were before, so we are now considering going straight for platforms. But there's nothing concrete yet, so that's where that is. And the third project is a feature film called Reverse the Upstream Story. This film is set in India. It's in English, but it's a parallel story of 2 girls. An Indian girl who's in Hollywood, who goes back to India to study Indian classical music. She's an actress. But she's studying Indian classical to do character study, to do character research for a role. But she doesn't tell this to her guru, because the guru is a very well-known Indian classical teacher. Pandit Krishna Mohan Bhatt, actually, he lives in New York only.
Oh, wow.
So Pandit Bhatt is her guru in the movie, who doesn't know that she's not a sincere student. She's just here to do research. Parallel to this is a girl named Adriana, who's from Venezuela. And she's stuck in India because of the financial crisis in the country. So she cannot go back. She's stuck in India. She cannot go anywhere. She was working with an NGO. So she ends up joining the Rally for Rivers movement that was taken out by Isha Foundation and Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudhar. So it's a parallel story of these 2 girls. Adriana travels the entire country, looks at India through the lens of Venezuela. She sees what didn't work out in her own country. She sees that India too suffers from many of the similar problems. So what can be different? Why is it different? Why is it not? There's a lot of civilization questions that are asked and then answered in the movie. So that's Adriana's story. And then Kankana's story goes through Indian classical music. It links to astronomy. It links to Indian spirituality. And these 2 parallel stories, we tell a civilization story of the whole country. So that's the next that's coming out. We just finished post-production a month back. So now we are working on trailers and everything else. And
Wow.
it's a feature film, but it's not exactly fiction. It's a hybrid. So Adriana and Kankana are completely fictional, but Pandit Krishna Mohan Bhatt and Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev, of course, are real people. They are
Yeah.
actually like they're playing themselves in the movie. So it's a mix between fiction, non-fiction narrative. So it's even filmed that way. Half the time it feels like a documentary, and then it feels like a fiction movie. So that's the next one that's coming out. This one I have produced and written and directed as well.
Lots of culture, I feel, that's going to come out of that movie.
I hope.
For sure. Well, Aditya, thank you so much again for your time on ITV Gold. I wish you the best for Transference.
Thank you so much, Aditya. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.